For nearly 15 years, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has experienced triumph after triumph, both critically and financially, creating a vast serialized web of storytelling spanning over 25 theatrical films and several television series. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU, has become a movie-making juggernaut the likes of which the industry has never seen before. The vast majority of fans and moviegoers have loved and defended almost all of the projects that have been produced under the Marvel Studios banner, with Thor: The Dark World from Alan Taylor being as close as the studio has ever flirted with rejection from their audience. Practically every other film seemed to effortlessly attain both critical praise and financial success. All of this was thanks in no small part to the most successful producer in Hollywood, Kevin Feige. Feige is the mastermind of the MCU and the ultimate gatekeeper of the creative decisions regarding the films produced under the Marvel name. Feige was always in firm control of every Marvel Studios project, and even the aforementioned Thor: Dark World was allegedly wrested from the director Alan Taylor's control after Feige presumably realized the movie was going off the rails. The Marvel Cinematic Universe represented both an unprecedented hot streak in the industry, as well as unprecedented producer and studio oversight on the directors who work with them. This pattern continued with very little derision, but a change in public perception of the vaunted film studio was beginning to occur. In 2019, as Marvel released their conclusion to their first 10 years of filmmaking, the extraordinary Avengers Endgame, a series of quotes from celebrated director Martin Scorsese caught the attention of the mainstream media and created a firestorm of debate in the film community. Scorsese argued that Marvel movies were not cinema, viewing them more as succinctly produced executions in commercialism rather than taking the risks and making the bold choices that true cinema allows its directors. With proverbial torches lit and metaphorical pitchforks sharpened, intense debate ensued throughout the internet and in the industry itself, as both fans and filmmakers were pulled into the fray. It is against this backdrop that Kevin Feige and Academy Award-winning art house director Chloe Zhao were hard at work creating what was intended to be a turning point for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A sweeping film set against an epic backdrop of thousands of years based upon comics legend Jack Kirby's Eternals. But no one could have possibly predicted the shocking outcome of this endeavor. On November 5th, 2021, Marvel Studios' Eternals was released to the most mixed reception of any MCU film in the history of the franchise, being the first to attain the infamous rotten status on the site Rotten Tomatoes. Surely something had gone wrong. Or has it? Greetings, fanboys and fangirls, Jared here, and I welcome you to my deep dive and in-depth review of Marvel's Eternals. Of course, we're going to keep this as light on spoilers as possible, so if you haven't seen the film yet, you're definitely safe to watch the video. However, I also understand that some folks do appreciate going into a movie knowing absolutely nothing, and I'll be doing my best to give the bare minimum of information while still making my points. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel as well so you don't miss out on future discussions. With that out of the way, let's begin. Eternals is the story of a 10-member group of super beings who have been on Earth for thousands of years, serving the seemingly godlike figure of Arishem. Arishem is a celestial, beings of immense power who foster the development of worlds into advanced civilizations, all while protecting the planet from dangerous monsters who prey on humans called deviants. Using the Eternals as both protectors and evolutionary catalysts, the Celestials guide humanity into technological, cultural, and medicinal advancements that they never could have reached of their own accord. Following the ideology of the book Chariots of the Gods, the Eternals are an extension of the ancient aliens theory that espouses the notion that humanity was given an extraterrestrial helping hand in advancing to our present level of development as a society. I came into the Eternals with very little comic book background knowledge of these characters. Although I'm a lifelong comics reader and fan, this team had escaped my pull list over the years, and it was something that I honestly had very little exposure to. The marketing hadn't really done that much to pique my interest either, seemingly doing very little to leverage the bright and bold Kirby visuals of the comic as a promotional tool. It was already apparent from the trailers that this would be a very different beast altogether, and perhaps be something unique to the shared continuity web of Marvel films. Simply put, the Eternals is equal parts complex, spectacular, lengthy, confounding, and bizarre. It's a film that's extraordinarily ambitious beyond anything we've seen in mainstream cinema in many years, but feels as if its structure is unruly and utterly unable to contain its grandiose designs. If other Marvel films could be accused of following a cut-and-dry three-act structure with humor and action beats that you could set your watch by, The Eternals is something entirely different. It isn't made to cater to an audience expectation or even the accepted ebb and flow of the standard film pacing that Western audiences are so familiar with. Rather, the film ends up often feeling like an art installation showing the audience masterfully shot vistas and actual locations, stunning recreations of historical conflicts, and vast intergalactic expanses. All of this assembled in a fashion more akin to a full-length novel or a season of a television series rather than a film. The bizarrety in assembly caused the movie, which is around 30 minutes shorter than Avengers Endgame, to feel 30 minutes longer than that culminating film. However, the confounding nature of the movie came to bear when I realized that as I sat there amongst the random time jumps, flashbacks and flash forwards, spontaneous journeys into deep space, and constant globetrotting that would make James Bond blush, that I was feeling the slow pace, but I wasn't hating it. I was fully soaking in the strangeness of the experience, the mesmerizing visual variety, and the seemingly never-ending introduction and reintroduction of characters throughout the film. By the end, I wondered how any young fan of the MCU would be able to glean much of anything from this film. But as for me, I was transported to another place, and for better or worse, I was captivated. The Eternals boasts a vast and diverse cast of 10 lead protagonists. Yes, you heard that right, 10 lead Eternals. Initially, what seemed like an impossible feat in introducing and balancing these characters while simultaneously giving them all unique and varied personalities is made manageable by director Chloe Zhao by using several effective strategies. Strategy 1. The road movie. The main present-day action of the film is presented in the form of a road movie as our lead Eternal, Cersei, goes on a quest to reunite the Eternals who have all been leading very separate lives. In this way, the group can slowly grow as we get time and character development for each new Eternal. The biggest issue with trying something like this is the inevitable lack of screen time for members who are introduced later, but even this is mitigated with a backup method. Strategy 2. Flashbacks. To make up for the team not being fully assembled at the very start of the movie, it utilizes flashbacks throughout the entire running time. These flashbacks range from thousands of years into the past to mere days before the start of the modern footage. Although they greatly disrupt the narrative of the film and sometimes feel jarring and random in their placement, these scenes do not serve a structural or pacing need, but rather a character need. The flashbacks give you context and general introductions to each of the 10 Eternals. This means that by the time you meet them in the present-day road movie scenes, you already have a basic understanding of their powers and their personalities. It's admittedly kind of a mess, and it's not overly harsh to call it a detriment to the film itself, but I walked out of the theater being able to tell you all of the names of the Eternals, their individual powers, and their personalities. No small feat for a film with 10 lead protagonists. But there was one more tool in the filmmaker's arsenal that allowed them to be so ambitious in introducing such a large cross-section of leads. Strategy 3. Diversity. Much has been made in recent years of the debate over diversity and representation in film. How much is enough? When is the variety in people we see on screen forced or natural? What is complementary and what is detrimental to a story? Although I would argue that most of these questions, by their very nature, actually in and of themselves prove why more diversity and representation is necessary in cinema, it serves a much more utilitarian purpose here. Simply put, the differences here in appearance, culture, orientation, and ability all serve to differentiate these characters in a way that just wouldn't be possible without it. They are all completely unique, and I never felt like there was a cookie-cutter Eternal that all of them were modeled after. You don't even have to look that far to see what kinds of positive effects purposely diversifying your superhero team can have. You know that tiny little obscure team known as the X-Men? Well, the only reason they ever became the mega popular definitive superhero team that they are today was a diversity initiative with economic purpose. Marvel needed to sell this book to overseas distributors, and the easiest way to do it was to diversify the X-Men with members representing potential new readers all over the world. From Canada to Africa to Russia, the X-Men became a racially diverse group that far surpassed the original all-white, all-American teenage team in every conceivable way. Taking any kind of political or theological arguments out of the mix, diversity makes good economic sense if you want to sell a product to as many consumers as possible. And it makes even more sense when you need to make a large amount of characters completely unique in an easily digestible visual and cultural shorthand. Simply put, ain't nobody mixing up the Planeteers either, y'all. With all these characters, it becomes a daunting task to try and quantify what does and does not work. The Eternals, who work best in the movie, are usually the ones who are given the most time to shine, and I'm happy to say that this doesn't feel compromised for most of them. Gemma Chan, who could previously be seen in a small role in Captain Marvel, does such a great job as Cersei, one of the more passive Eternals thrust into a situation that's out of her depth. She is both believable and instantly likable, continuing to prove that she's a capable and talented actress, although more agency for her character at times would have made her a stronger lead. Brian Tyree Henry is also very effective as the technology expert of the team, Phastos. Here, they take great advantage of his unique comic skills in fun ways that kept me amused each time he was on screen. This was in stark contrast to the Michael Bay-esque humor of his conspiracy theorist character in Godzilla vs. Kong. Salma Hayek was incredibly earnest as Ajak, but I often felt throughout the movie that I wish she was getting more screen time, which is probably a great compliment to her performance. Angelina Jolie as the fierce Thena didn't always get the amount of screen time that I felt her character needed either. When she did get good dialogue, I often felt that she was quickly ushered away or separated from the rest of the group. I'm not sure if this was the result of a scheduling difficulty or something else, but she often felt like an outlier to the rest of the team. What she did get to do was, however, very effective. Richard Madden was perhaps a little one note for my tastes as Icarus, often playing him as far too stoic for my taste and not showing very much emotion in the first two-thirds of the film. By the last part, Madden is able to show off much more of his range and really explore the character, but by then some decisions in the scripting undercut some of that emotion. So I do wish that there was more focus on the relationship between he and Cersei, as sometimes it works very well in the beautifully edited flashbacks, and sometimes it just doesn't. I would have much rather seen Cersei interact with Dane, her new boyfriend played by Kit Harington, but for narrative reasons I actually wonder if this was maybe intentional. However, there is one Eternal who stands above them all, Kumail Nanjiani as the lovable Kingo. Instantly funny, incredibly endearing, and an absolutely comic book-worthy physical condition, he and his loyal assistant provide a wit and comedy element to the overbearing nature of the film. They show up in full effect about halfway through the movie, but honestly, this film needed them much sooner. A very bizarre decision is made in the final act pertaining to Kingo, and although I think it's bizarre beyond reckoning for the movie, it is so completely original that I just have to admire the filmmakers for actually going through with it. When you see the movie, you'll know what I mean. Lauren Ridloff, the superb deaf actress from The Walking Dead, is Makari, the speedster, and uses American Sign Language throughout the movie. I absolutely love this character, and she is such a great actress that I wanted to see twice as much of her than I did. Unfortunately, she is the last Eternal they come upon in the modern-day road trip setting, but I would have loved to have seen much more of her, and is an effective implementation of diversity in the film. Dublin actor Barry Keoghan plays Druig, the mind control Eternal who struggles with a god complex, wondering if he should just force humans to give up their conflicts by controlling their minds. He's fascinating to watch, and although he doesn't always land every beat, with an interesting choice in mixed accent, he is fascinating to watch, and I love the romantic interplay between he and Makari. Their chemistry was an absolute treat for the audience, and I could tell everyone was enjoying it. I love the character Gilgamesh, and wish he was present for far more of the film, but he had some excellent comedy and dramatic notes, even if one physical joke seemed very inappropriately placed involving a pie. You'll know it when you see it. Young Leah McHugh did a very good job as Sprite. I think the goal was to make her seem like someone who was weary of a life of thousands of years trapped in a teenager's body, and I feel that she accomplished that. I wish that we had gotten to see more of she and Ajax's reunion, only alluded to in the film, but I felt that would have gone a ways in humanizing her. There are also two notable vocal performances in the film. David Kaye of Beast Wars Megatron fame is fantastic as the celestial Arishem. His incredible vocal performance gives a sense of otherworldly grandiosity to the towering behemoth, and is by far the most Kirby-esque aspect of the film. Bill Skarsgard, as you might know him from It, plays a vocal role in the last quarter of the movie, but his villainous character feels like an afterthought and a relic of a bygone era of superhero cinema, even reminding me of the villainous entities from X-Men Dark Phoenix. Still, Bill does a great job with what lines he has, but I'm afraid this idea needed a rewrite to work effectively, and the talented Skarsgard is mostly wasted. The many characters and settings of the Eternals, while definitely overwhelming to the structure of the film, are lavishly costumed and set dressed with great care by the unbelievably talented production team at Marvel. The Eternals' costumes are some of their finest design work thus far, and looked incredible in still shots as well as in motion. CGI was utilized to a very high standard here, but the actual location shooting, of which there is so much, does much of the heavy lifting. By the end of the film, I felt I had traveled the world over alongside the characters. The design work was very impressive as well. Although it didn't embrace the Kirby aesthetics to the extent that I would have preferred, Arishem himself was such a delight to see due to the uncompromised scale, making me wish I'd seen it in IMAX. I also greatly admired the design of the Eternal ship, the Domo, lovingly named after one of the original founding members in the comics, selling me on buying the underscaled but well-designed Lego version. Speaking of toys, the design work was strong enough to get me to buy the entire Marvel Legends wave of action figures, so that certainly says something. The Ramin Djawadi orchestral score did a great job of building the epic mood. Elements of the score reminded me slightly of the more epic beats from the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtracks. Although I didn't necessarily walk away humming any of the main themes as I did with the score for the Black Panther and Captain America, it was wonderfully complimentary, and it helped build the scale of the world. As previously stated, Marvel has endured some very loud criticisms from people both in and out of the industry. It's been said that the studio is so preoccupied with micromanaging its directors and stifling their creative voices in service to an overarching narrative that they've abandoned risk-taking that makes cinema so worthwhile. After hearing these criticisms for the past 2 years, I have to wonder if Eternals is Marvel's answer to them. Its structure is completely atypical, creating a completely confounding and sometimes alien pace. Aside from its end credit scenes, it has very little connection to the greater Marvel universe and feels almost completely self-contained. It explores some very heavy themes while treading in waters previously not ventured, and all of it ends up feeling like an experimental director's cut, without any sort of production mandates or control imposed upon its director. Movie marketing has told me this past year that I should expect Denis Villeneuve's Dune to be the most radical and experimental mainstream big-budget film experience of the summer, and that I wasn't ready for how out there it would be. Instead, I can now safely say that I was entirely prepared for the competence and scale of Dune, but completely unprepared for the scope, the grandeur, and the utterly confounding nature of Marvel's Eternals. An historical epic taking place over thousands of years, juggling 10 lead protagonists set against every conceivable backdrop the Earth and beyond has to offer, while staking its claim in the crowded landscape of comic book cinema, is a sight to behold that works more often than it doesn't. Even with the structural flaws of the film prominently on display, it's my sincere belief that Eternals deserves to exist. Kevin Feige and his Marvel Studios has made 25 movies before this one, most of which followed all the tenets of what has made their movies work so well. But the Eternals represents their first true departure from this format. If any studio on Earth has earned the right to take these sorts of chances, it's Marvel. And I can't help but wonder if this film's staunchest critics were the very ones who loudly chided Marvel for not taking such chances sooner. As for me, I can't say that it comes together traditionally or even all that well in places, but the experience of Eternals is truly like no other. It was worth my time, but more importantly, it was worth my respect. Kevin Feige knows that even if this experiment didn't connect with most critics, that projects like this are the key to the studio's future and will keep them from the stagnation that they were so loudly accused of throughout the industry during the production of this very film. The Eternals is an experience like no other that you owe it to yourself to be challenged by, and will likely be discussed and debated for years to come. Friends, I hope you enjoyed the review today. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other deep dives that we take right here on Fanboys Forever. Of course, we look at lots of action figures, films, and even video games from time to time, so there's a great variety of content. Of course, I would love to hear what you thought about this incredibly divisive film down below, even if it's the polar opposite of my opinions. Although The Eternals was definitely the kind of odd and experimental film that I enjoy, I completely understand that it is not for many folks, especially for younger audiences who may not find much to care about in the movie. However, I would love to hear your opinions down below. Let me know, was The Eternals too weird and sluggish for you? Or were you like me and you were thrilled by the absolute strangeness that was this very special Marvel film? Anyway, friends, as always, God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.